Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the County Public Safety Coordinating Council regular committee meeting for May 14th of 2021. I want to thank all of you for being here today. I understand that we now have a quorum, and so we can proceed with our business. Ms. Preza, if we could have a roll call.
Ms. Holt?
Present.
Sheriff Cronister?
Present.
Chief Judge Figueroa?
Present.
Judge Conrad?
Present.
Commissioner Overman?
Present.
Ms. Stewart?
Present.
Chief Dugan?
Present.
Mr. Bates?
Present.
Mr. Parkinson?
Present.
Ms. Lewis?
Present.
Mr. Barentine?
Present.
Mr. Proctor?
Here.
Those recorded as appearing virtually. Mr. Warren?
Renee Marotti for Andrew Warren.
Ms. Royston?
Sandra Peatney for Judy Roston.
Ms. Obergen?
Present.
Ms. Grant?
Present.
Mr. Daniel? Colonel Moore? Mr. Davis?
John Newman for Addison Davis.
Ms. Condemo?
Present.
Councilman Goulds? Senator Rowson? You have quorum.
Thank you very much. For those of you that are appearing virtually, if you would use the chat feature if you wish to be heard on any particular matter, and I'll do my best to keep track of that. If all else fails, I think most of you have my cell phone number. Feel free to just text me and say you've been waving at me for about 5 minutes. It's not my best thing, technology. The approval of the minutes for January 22nd of 2021 is our next order of business. If you could take a look at the minutes, and then if we could have an appropriate motion.
I'd move to approve.
Second.
Move to approve by Chief Judge Ronald Figueroa with a second by Commissioner Overman. Does anyone have any additions, corrections, or deletions to the minutes, or any discussion on the motion? Seeing none, all signify in favor of the motion by saying aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Thank you. Our next order of business under old business, Mr. Parkinson, Sequential Intercept Mapping Updates and the Reentry System Subcommittee presentation, please, sir.
Thank you, Ms. Holt. As many of you recall, many of our organizations participated in a sequential intercept mapping of the criminal justice and behavioral health systems, most recently in January of 2019. Subsequent to that mapping exercise, a report was generated which identified the strengths and weaknesses in Hillsborough County's response to individuals with behavioral health issues involved in the criminal justice system. Over the last 2 years, a number of subcommittees have been meeting to address a number of the issues that were identified in the sequential intercept mapping. We were asked to give an update on where those activities are. With us today, we have Dr. Dan Ringhoff, who holds a PhD in social work, and he's also a licensed clinical social worker. Many of you may recall Dr. Ringhoff from his work as our first mental health court liaison with the circuit, going back to 2008-ish, I believe, when we first were able to implement that position with some funding from the Department of Children and Families. Dr. Ringhoff subsequently went to the University of South Florida to be their assistant director of their Baker Act Reporting Center, and now he has also moved on to work in the private sector, which we really appreciate. Dr. Ringhoff provides a degree of technical assistance to a number of our efforts, and he had agreed a few months back to help one of our subcommittees, specifically the Enhanced Community Collaborations Committee report, kind of galvanize what they had been working on. And before you in your packet, you actually have a draft report of the group. At this juncture, they are looking for some feedback on their work product before they make it a final product. Dr. Ringhoff is going to give a 10,000-foot view of what the group worked on, some of the issues that they identified, and some of their ongoing recommendations to address our perceived issues. So Dr. Ringhoff, I'll go ahead and turn it over to you.
Thank you, Rob, and thank you for the opportunity to present on behalf of the Sequential Intercept Mapping Enhanced Community Collaborations Committee report, which was focused on reentry. So I'd like to start first by thanking our co-chairs, Craig Powell and Marie Marino, who, thanks to their leadership, helped us get through this process. They kept us moving forward and kept us on task, and also kept us on the vision, which was the reintegration and rehabilitation of persons with co-occurring mental health and substance use disorders, transitioning from the jails and prisons and back into the community, into their Hillsborough County residences. I'd also like to thank each committee member who volunteered their time, as well as the individual providers and content experts who presented to the committee. Without their assistance and knowledge and experience working in the mental health and criminal justice fields, we would not have been able to put together this report. So you'll find and I think most of you have a draft report, and I'll reference it a few times during this presentation, but just wanted to point out in Appendix A, which is on page 20, you'll find a list of all the committee members, and their tireless work should not go unrecognized. This was quite an effort on their behalf. In Appendix B, you'll also find a chronological list of the presentations by community providers, as well as content experts to the committee. To provide some context, the committee was formed as part of the Sequential Intercept mapping hosted by Hillsborough County on January 10th, 2019. The workshop was facilitated by USF, the Criminal Justice Mental Health and Substance Abuse Technical Assistance Center. And the purpose of the workshop was to identify resources, gaps in services, opportunities in the existing mental health system, and to establish priorities for enhancing the recovery-oriented system of care for persons with co-occurring mental health and substance use disorders transitioning from the jail into the community. So out of this workshop, ad hoc committees were formed to address priority areas identified in the workshop by the community stakeholders in attendance. Our committee, which was Priority Area 1, focused on enhanced community collaboration. Other committees focused on residential treatment and recovery-oriented programs that support psychosocial rehabilitation, such as the clubhouse model. So each committee was charged with gathering information to better understand the current available level of services being delivered to residents of Hillsborough County, and to make recommendations for stakeholders to address gaps in needs and services and supports, implement positive change, and increase recovery capital for a successful transition and sustainable life in the community, and establish appropriate and measurable goals to meet the anticipated or unmet needs. So our committee was tasked with 6 objectives, which you can find on page 10 of the report. The vision articulated by the committee at the onset was the development of a comprehensive plan that seeks to mitigate the negative impact of thousands of adults returning from jail and prison to the most distressed and underserved neighborhoods, and to provide them with the resources they need to succeed and not be rearrested. So wanted to just kind of review briefly some of the recommendations from the committee, which start on page 10. So when covering the recommendations, we also address the current status in the community regarding these particular issues, and we also addressed best practices. What are the best practices for each area? So the details are in the report, but I wanted to go through each and just kind of make some comments and focus on some of the really key important aspects, and also talk a little bit about the research and the evidence for some of these recommendations. So on page 10, the first objective was data collection and information sharing, and this is perhaps one of the most important objectives. The action step that the committee was charged with was to explore the feasibility of a data work group or data collaborative. In terms of current practices, the committee noted that there is not a centralized database or system where a person-level data can be accessed or shared among providers, or a centralized data system where aggregate data can be used to even inform strategic planning and inform the effectiveness of different programs. So in terms of best practices recommend, and this comes from the Council on State Government's Justice Center, they recommend building databases that can talk to each other. So different agencies can share data about individuals as well as about programs and resources available to individuals. So the committee, understanding this is a best practice, wanted to highlight the importance of this. And there's certainly, in terms of the recommendations, there's an expectation that all providers will share de-identified client demographic data, but also work towards sharing identified based on the permissions given by the individuals. And that would be ideally done through a universal client release. That would be sort of the mechanism for sharing information. Actually, one of the objectives in these recommendations also is a universal release form. So this is a high priority. It's essential if you're going to share information to be able to make sure individuals can consent to the information that's being shared. And it's for their benefit. It's to help them with transitioning back into the community to be successful. So a key recommendation of the committee is to establish a centralized database or data sharing system. And we actually were presented one named Quartify by NAFCARE. And it was a pretty amazing system that allowed agencies to share information to develop case plans using real-time data, so it's up to date. And this is the kind of data that, if shared, can really support the continuum of care for persons being released from jail into the community. I believe that the NAFCARE also presented Quartify to the County Public Safety Coordinating Council, and my understanding is that the Public Safety Coordinating Council also has supported preliminary plans to pilot this data sharing software application. And so in terms of Objective 2, which can be found on page 13 of the draft report, it's exposure to evidence-based practices. This is another key area. Now, the programs that the Hillsborough County funds and the managing entity funds in the community all utilize evidence-based practices. This is pretty standard in care now. In terms of criminal justice programs, there's a widely accepted strategy. It's an evidence-based strategy for addressing the needs of persons involved in the criminal justice system. It also can be applied to individuals with mental health or substance use disorders. It's called Risk Needs Responsivity. I just want to highlight it real quickly, but the goal is actually to effectively use limited community resources. And it's to use them so efficiently so you can actually achieve the goals of the community, which is primarily reducing recidivism. In order to do that, to be efficient with resources, the goal is to, for the first R, risk, means prioritize services for persons with a high risk of reoffending. In terms of needs, needs stands for criminogenic needs, which are basically the risk factors for recidivism. So you want to target your resources, your programs want to target services towards the greatest risks for reoffending. So again, the focus is on reducing recidivism. And responsivity, which is the last R in the R&R model, is those things that actually, if they're not addressed, you're not going to be able to target those criminogenic needs, those risk factors. Because if you have mental health symptoms, they need to be addressed before you can engage in criminal thinking or antisocial, peers. These are the types of criminogenic needs in the model. And you can find more about them on page 6 of the report. So this is the key framework, evidence-based framework, from which to develop criminal justice and behavioral health strategies. And this is the model that the committee is recommending. Objective 4, I'll speak a little bit more about it. In terms of Objective 3, which is on page 13, I also mentioned that one. That was the importance of a universal release. Again, this is the mechanism to share information. It's very important. So if we're ever able to establish a centralized data system, then a universal release is going to be crucial to making that work effectively. So on page 14, we'll find Objective 4, which is related to the evidence base, which is the risk needs responsivity model. And this is the use of a validated R&R instrument. So in order to be able to identify the priority high-risk offenders, you need to be able to assess for them. And so, and then also in order to target the criminogenic needs, which is the high risk for recidivism, rearrest and recidivism, you need to be able to assess for those as well to target them. So the committee is recommending a validated risk needs assessment instrument to be able to assess for these areas. The county is ahead of the game with this. They've been, a number of years ago, they actually had Dr. Roger Peters, help identify which would be possibly the best R&R instrument to use, and where he recommended the LCMI, and it's currently being used by a number of agencies in the community already. But we didn't want to exclusively recommend that one because that one costs money, and some of the community providers that may not have a great deal of funds may choose to use another type of instrument. However, we're strongly recommending the use of a validated risk needs responsivity assessment tool. So on page 15, you'll find objectives 1.5 and 1.6, which are 5 and 6, transportation and the use of peer supports. Transportation is I think it's sort of understood that it's absolutely essential. If people are going to be able to get to their appointments, if they're going to be able to be successful, get to their jobs, do what's needed to reintegrate into the community, they're going to need transportation. And the committee makes some specific recommendations regarding transportation in the report. As far as the use of peer support specialists, just want to emphasize this is another area which is evidence-based practice. Peer supports are recommended in any recovery-oriented care system. They're part of that recovery model, that psychosocial rehabilitation. And they're highly recommended and for best practices in criminal justice settings. And they're used in the Veterans Treatment Court. We have veteran peers working with the individuals in that court. So it's strongly recommended based on the evidence and support for it. It's highly effective, and it's also being used in a number of the programs. So that's just a quick overview of these recommendations. I don't want to take more of your time, but thank you for the opportunity to share. Details can be found in the report.
Thank you very much, Dr. Ringhoff. What I would like from the group is we don't need action on this, but the committee is looking for feedback on their draft report. So at your leisure, if you can review this report and then send feedback to me, and my staff will make sure that the subcommittee is able to incorporate that feedback before they produce a final report.
Okay. Rob, just two quick comments and/or questions. Can you give a quick update on where we are on the Quartify part of life?
Absolutely. In the fall, this group met, received the presentation from NAVCare. I think we were all impressed with the technology solution. We've had a couple subsequent meetings to talk about what that might look like for here in Hillsborough County. We're moving forward on developing an actual plan of action for Quartify. Obviously, it's going to be a pilot, so we're not going to be able to do everything we want to do at once. But right now, we're looking at using some key data sources, the Odyssey system, hopefully with the clerk's office, the sheriff's office data system, the public defender's office data system, and one other data system to be determined as kind of the proof of concept. So we're working with NAVCare right now to put that together. We'll be bringing it back to this group later on this year. We have placed some resources in our annual budget that, should the board approve it in October, or by October 1, we should be able to support it as a one-year pilot project and then reassess after that.
Commissioner?
Thank you. And because I wasn't part of the initial start of this project, but I've been running a similar set of challenges as it pertains to child and adult human trafficking. And we've developed assessment tools for identifying human trafficking victims. But because there's still the recidivism of individuals that have been arrested for prostitution, which is a crime, but human trafficking is a victim-based crime that is very complex when it comes to the human dynamic and the mental illness associated with choices for individuals that have been coerced into believing that's all they're worth. I see some great opportunity for remapping the efforts that this community, as the chair of the Commission on Human Trafficking, and the recent legislation that was passed to slide in the tools that we already have that may or may not have been incorporated within this framework. There has been conversations about having a human trafficking court because of the complexities associated with that, but that's not there yet, obviously. But if we could use this system and the framework that we have for identifying victims of human trafficking when they get arrested for prostitution or other drug-related charges, there may be a way of assisting those victims who all have the very same problems, and I would assume have a very high recidivism rate for something that no one grew up wanting to be. So I just wanted to ask if there's a way to collaborate with the work that you've done here. This is pretty awesome from what I see, where we could accelerate the work that's being done sort of offline, but would fit very well within this framework and maybe make a big difference in the citizens in our community that are affected by that. So.
Thank you, Commissioner. And I guess the short answer is yes. The Quartify system has some potential utility for other target populations. Obviously, our initial effort and thoughts were to focus it on those persons with behavioral health disorders and substance abuse disorders involved in the criminal justice system. But the reality is the system has the capability of identifying several other subpopulations. And the key is to make everything automatic so that everyone who needs to be involved is aware and alerted and can engage as soon as possible. So, yes.
Right, thank you very much, because I believe the identification that you're going to find in this report are going to be the same people, but the peer review and the peer support and the investigative work that needs to be done is slightly different. So, but I feel a lot of those individuals would actually benefit from this in a great way. So thank you very much for the work that you've done. It's been excellent.
Rob, my second comment was just, obviously the pandemic has afforded us an opportunity to see that the use of technology can sometimes benefit individuals such as the ones that we're speaking about instead of the challenge of transportation. So at some point in time, do you think the committee is going to perhaps consider modifying the transportation piece and the support services piece through use of technology, which of course I understand requires funding, but I just have found that that's the way we kept business going for the last 15 months.
That's a good point, Madam Chair. As you know, many of the interventions and new programs that we develop to address the issues of unmet need that we identify, usually through SIM mapping process or other issues identified by this group or our Board of County Commissioners, some of them are strategic in nature, some of them are tactical in nature, and we can get accomplished very quickly. In terms of the resources that we use, sometimes we have a situation where the board will give us additional resources. Sometimes it's my office reallocating resources that we already have to a new or bigger problem. I've been very lucky thus far in that the board has been very supportive of us. Honestly, I have most of the resources that I have available to me on the streets or going on the streets right now. So there is a limit to what I can do. I would love to be able to tackle all of these problems simultaneously if they have the resources, even if I had the staff. I do what I can do with the resources that I have. But yeah, I would love to be able to address all of those issues identified in the report. And some of the issues that Dr. Ringhoff had mentioned earlier that some of the other committees are working on, for instance, the behavioral health clubhouse model, which it sounds warm and fuzzy, but it's actually a psychosocial rehab program that serves individuals with behavioral health disorders in the community and can serve as an alternative to bringing them to the jail. Can help them get a job, can help them engage in meaningful daytime activity instead of engaging in drug use or associating with criminal peers. Despite the fact that we haven't had concrete operational resources to focus on that, that project has actually moved forward. There's a number of groups in the community advocating for it, but we've also gotten to a point where we were able to get the managing entity, Central Florida Behavioral Health Care Network, who is the keeper of state mental health dollars, to commit funds to it. And they're looking for us to commit an equal amount, which I, again, have asked for those amounts in our annual budget, which I don't anticipate any problems getting it. So we have all these other projects that we're also moving forward on that weren't necessarily discussed at length here. So yes, transportation and those other issues do need to be addressed. It's just a matter of when do we address it? What are our priority concerns? And also, even in deciding with Quartify, where is our initial focus going to be for the pilot, we had to pick target areas where we knew that we can have the biggest bang for the buck. We know the sheriff runs the reentry center, and if we could coalesce around the work of the reentry center and support what they do, and support the public defender's office and their efforts, that we would have the biggest bang for the buck in terms of helping people reenter the community. So yes, we have all these unmet needs, and we're addressing them as we can with the resources that we have.
Well, on behalf of the council, we thank both of you for your presentation today. More importantly, the work that I know that goes on a day in and day out basis, because obviously Ms. Marino keeps me advised by many pages of memos of things that are going on. All of the stakeholders really have, since we started this process, have really been very integral in where we are and how we are moving this community forward. And we thank you very much for your efforts and anything that any of us can do to assist you. I know we're not the ones in the work group, but feel free to reach out to all of us. And we thank the sheriff for bringing to our attention this particular new system and for your role that obviously you're going to play with the Quartify. So we thank you very much, Sheriff. Okay. All right. Under new business, this is an opportunity for any of us that would like to discuss any budgetary concerns that may have developed as a result of the recent legislative session. On behalf of the Public Defender's Office, our budgetary cut was de minimis in the amount of $11,000, and so I think I'll pass on making any comments at this time. However, if anyone else would like to make a comment, please feel free to do so.
Madam Chair, can you hear us?
I can hear you all.
I believe someone was trying to get your attention online.
Madam Chair,
Yes.
this is Councilman Goose. I've been on the call listening to the report, so I wouldn't know that I was on the call.
Councilman, welcome, and thank you very much for letting us know that you are with us. We thank you for your leadership in the city of Tampa. Any comments on the legislative budget?
Madam Chair, I think, we did a lot better than we thought we would do. Certainly, as we discussed going into the session, I think this was the first year that I didn't even have to set foot in Tallahassee, and we wound up doing pretty well. So I'm going to stay out of Tallahassee in the future, I think. But from the courts, the legislature has funded 6 additional Hillsborough County judges, 4 that were funded last year but were vetoed by the governor. We've got those back in the budget again this year, and we were certified by the Supreme Court for the need for an additional 2 county judges. So we're optimistic that the governor will give us at least some additional county judges, which will be a huge help with the caseload that we're dealing with and the backlog we're going to deal with the pandemic.
Thank you, Chief. Seeing no other comments at this time, then, Ms. Stuart, Legal Voices Committee update, please, ma'am.
Thank you. And if we could put up the PowerPoint that my government relations person who is here prepared for us. We formed this committee at our last meeting in January and met twice. On the next slide is our 2 meeting dates. Had very robust conversation. The third slide, please, shows just the members who participated, and I appreciate all of you who came forward and shared with us your legislative issues as we moved forward to going to Tallahassee. Next slide, please. On March 5th, which was our last meeting, during our March 5th meeting, we actually had a conversation about how we could recognize, inform, and make sure that we stayed in front, being that we weren't going to Tallahassee as often, how we could stay in front of some of these issues. And Commissioner Overman volunteered that she would bring some of the priority bills forward to the full commission for recognition, and then letters to our local delegation so that they could at least see that we were working together, and that did actually happen. So thank you again, Commissioner Overman, for bringing that forward. The next slide, please. On the 26th, we met again, had that conversation and furthered. On April 7th, the BOCC actually approved letters of support for both my office and the PD's office for two very specific items. The PD's office was looking at Veterans Court being approved, and we were looking to have our bill, Senate Bill 838, supported by our local delegation, which really, that bill is on the last slide, please, really talks about just how allowing for better stability for the clerk's offices, especially in emergencies, and allowing our offices to keep a 16% reserve at the state level. We, like Judge Ficaretto said, we are also very hopeful that they will also approve the line item in the budget that was asked for by the CCOC and the judges group together for additional judges to address the backlog. They did put that in the budget last year, but they didn't fund it. We're supposed to get 4 judges last year. Hopefully that money will include also help from my office to support those judges, and we can move the backlog out of the way. So I just wanted to thank, Chair Holt already asked for additional comments on the legislative process. Thank the people who were involved. We do have a lot of work to do in keeping courts running, but I think we're moving in the right direction. And thank Judge Ficaretto again for your support in how we continue to make sure that the constituency of this community is being served. So thank you.
Madam Chair, we're very fortunate because in a lot of communities, the courts, the clerks kind of butt heads, and we've historically had a great relationship with our clerk, and it shows in our success. And as we close the door on this session, we've got to look forward to the next session, which I remind everybody is an early start in January. So we need to be aware of that.
Absolutely, and I certainly think, and I know that we have a meeting that has been coordinated by the constitutional officers, and I think it's really important that we really work together, because moving us forward in this community, a lot of people are under the impression that we haven't been open for business, but as you and I both know, we are knocking on the door of probably about 100 criminal jury trials. And obviously it requires the work of everyone, both law enforcement, to make sure that they're coming to the court hearings, and obviously the clerk's office. And we meet on a weekly basis to make sure that we're moving things forward. And so I do think that, as you say, Judge, this community has stuck together during the pandemic, and we've moved our community forward in a very safe manner. Again, very grateful, very thankful to the Sheriff's Office for everything they've done to allow us to continue to have access to our clients, which is important, as well as providing our clients who are in custody the opportunities to be vaccinated. And I think that's very important, because we're always a leader here from this community. And so again, Sheriff, I know I say this probably often, but I'm very grateful for what you do and how you really do treat everybody with respect and courtesy, and you know, it's just, it can't be said enough, so thank you again.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Any other comments? Okay, all right. At this time, then, we will have a discussion by Mr. Parkinson on the 2020-2021 Justice Assistance Concept Paper results that was chaired yesterday by Judge John Conrad, who is present with us today.
Thank you, Ms. Holt. The county had about $104,000 per year available over the next 3 years for projects covered under the Federal Justice Assistance Grant Program. So we issued our traditional Justice Assistance Grant concept paper process. This year, I don't know if it was because of the pandemic or other factors, we didn't have as many applications as we traditionally do. But the three applications that we did get were very valid in terms of their need. There is actually a summary in your handouts. It's a summary of FY 2022 Federal Justice Assistance Grant proposals. That's just a brief 20,000-foot view of what the proposals were. We had three. One was the Juvenile Reentry Education Program, or JREP, from Success for Kids and Families, which is a partnership between them and the Hillsborough County School District. That's a program that provides GEDs and follow-along education for youth involved in the juvenile justice system. We had the Veteran Services Initiative, which is a project under the Public Defender's Office that provides specialized representation and case management services for veterans involved in the criminal justice system. And we had a proposal from the Greater Miami Asian Coalition for Business, Inc., which also, it's a 501c3 nonprofit that also serves the Hillsborough County area. And their project was focused on Asian American focused crime prevention, identified as a concern because of some of the negative community issues surrounding the pandemic. Again, projects all were very worthy. Judge Conrad's group met yesterday, had some really good deliberation. Along with that was a presentation by all of the applicant agencies. They all had an opportunity to present and answer some questions that maybe weren't addressed in their proposals. After the proposals, the committee, talked about some of the strengths and weaknesses of the proposals and projects, and subsequently made the following recommendations for funding. They recommended that the Juvenile Reentry Education Program be funded at the level of $23,729.50 per year over the next 3 years, for a total of $71,188.50. They recommended that the Public Defender's Veteran Service Initiative be funded at the level of $80,000 per year for the next 3 years, totaling $240,000. They did not recommend any funding for the Asian American Focused Crime Prevention Project at this time. However, the subcommittee did request that if the county receives more JAG funds than anticipated, because right now our dollar amounts are estimated until the feds actually send us down the actuals. If we do receive more funds, then they requested that the Veteran Service Initiative be funded at the full level that they requested, and that we also reach out to the Greater Miami Asian Coalition to see if there's a way that we could fund a portion of their project as well. So those are the recommendations of Judge Conrad's subcommittee. Judge Conrad, would you like to add anything to those recommendations?
No, I think we had a really good opportunity to hear from all the groups individually. I do want to compliment Rob and his staff. We got the proposals on a Monday. By Tuesday, we had a summary. We had all the concept proposals to review, and so the process on Thursday, yesterday, to review all of them and meet with the individuals requesting the funds went very smooth because of that. So I appreciate it. I agree with him that all of them did represent a very valid request for funds, but at the end of the day, in discussing all the various nuances in each request, we felt that this was an appropriate way to at least recommend to the group as how those funds should be allocated. So again, thanks to Rob and his staff for their assistance.
I totally agree with you. Judge Conrad worked with Rob and his staff for a long time, and they are always on top of everything and really do some great work and in a very efficient way. Mr. Parkinson, if you don't mind just letting the minutes reflect that because I was present for the presentation of the Public Defender's Office when we were asked to remove ourselves from the meeting, I did in fact remove myself from the meeting and I did not vote on the recommendation. Obviously, we will be seeking a motion at this time from someone on the council, and I will be abstaining from a vote at this point.
Yes.
Motion to accept the recommendation of the group by Mr. Bates, a second by Commissioner Overman. Any discussion on the motion and/or the recommendations or concept papers? All in favor of the motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed?
Aye.
Thank you all very much. Any other business that we have? Any announcements by anyone in the group? Ms. Stuart, would you like to introduce our guest that's in the audience today to the council so that everyone will be familiar with her as they see her both here in our community and in Tallahassee?
Sure, absolutely. With me today is Jenna Hodgins. She is my government relations staff member. She followed me over from the place down the street. She was head of general director of charter schools for many years. So she has a good feel for Tallahassee, but I know she and Julie are probably the only two people I know that have spent as much time in Tallahassee as anybody this past session. So we welcome her. You'll see her around.
Yes, she absolutely. You did a great job of keeping track of a lot of the bills that we all had an interest in, so thank you very much on behalf of the council and of my office. Any public comment? Anyone wish to comment that is with us virtually? All that being said, Chief Judge Ronald Ficarota moves that we adjourn.
As they say in Tallahassee, move we rise.
And moves we rise and see everybody. Have a great weekend all.
Thank you all. Always love that. Moves we rise.
I love that. Love that show.